You know, man, I may not have a job. I may not get that many views on YouTube. But I'm still fast as fuck, boy!
Yes, you numbnut. Before you say it, the term Mary Sue can apply to even male characters, but recently with all the SJWs and female representation trend written by the hard leftist feminist Nazis who believe portraying strong women in media require them to be nigh perfect and without flaws like Rey from Star Wars, this really diminishes the Mary Sue to being nothing but a character with no problems throughout the duration of the series and manages to overcome all her problems, or his problems, being the nigh omnipotent, perfect fictional character. So yes, Mary Sues can apply to men because there are dozens of anime Mary Sue characters that are men like Kirito from Sword Art Online. But then again, most anime with male Mary Sue characters suck because, as it turns out, you need to be a good writer to have a well-developed character. Hiro Mashima. But before we get into this long and exhausting video, I'd like to say other manga that are less known but 20 times better than Goblin Slayer, literally exploring the same themes, are Kiba, No Orange Pillar, Good Night World, Yubel Blatt, Blade of the Guardians, Excess Online, and Night Run. Not only do these stories have better characters, but present situations where the flaws and errors within the character's own right define who they are. Their mistakes and flaws bite them in the ass, and they're able to endure because they're good characters and they're well written to some capacity that I'm able to accept that, hey, this is a good writer to some degree, because these people have problems and are not brain-dead chupacabras. And if you're crying that these stories don't fit within the pathetic Goblin Slayer criteria for you, I found a manga literally with the same plot with everyone's favorite villains. Evil just to be evil rapist creatures, with killing being their second favorite thing in the world, along with evil just to be evil villain who also has a political agenda and who is also a rapist. Oh yeah, and I forgot the best quality of this human villain in this entire series. He's an old white fat businessman, living in a world that's nonsensical where humanity hasn't declared war on the species that's literally annihilating them and skull fucking them in the ass because it doesn't fit the economic benefits of the people that are in the high castle. Sounds familiar. Sounds exactly like Goblin Slayer. There's also the added bonus of the main character fucking his stepmom on the first chapter after his dad dies. They were literally touching each other out of a Pornhub movie, and I'm surprised Pornhub isn't writing this manga because some of the dialogue is absolutely atrocious and no one would actually touch their stepmom like the main character was in this manga. Anyway, you pervert, in addition to this, the land that this magical family's been teleported to also has been dominated by artificially sexy warrior women who are also Amazonians, very much like Wonder Woman. Now, without a doubt, this manga is a hot steaming shit pile, but it still remains to be better than Goblin Slayer because the main character isn't fucking invincible. Yeah, he's surrounded by cliche stereotypes, but they have more characteristics than the characters in Goblin Slayer in the first 3 chapters than what Goblin Slayer can produce in 40 chapters because it doesn't lie about what the actual story is about and what's actually being presented to the reader, hiding under some grotesque rape fantasy that the writer of Goblin Slayer likes to write. If anyone's wondering what this crap is called, it's called Gemu Obu Familia Family Sinki, and is written by Yamashiki Mikito, the psychopath who wrote DidTube, which is another Tory 20 times better than Goblin Slayer. While I'm on the topic, another manga that's better than Goblin Slayer is The Skeleton Soldier Who Couldn't Protect the Dungeon, which is basically ReZero but the main protagonist of Overlord, but he's actually genuinely an evil person, killing adventurers for his own selfish reasons that make him more human than evil despite being an undead skeleton. Him being a skeleton majorly affects the plot and his actions have real consequences considering the main main character is an undead monster within the story, and all the humans are attempting to kill him due to his very nefarious actions that he does throughout the duration of the story. He has to live with the scrutiny in addition to doing what he loves within the confines of this world. What makes the story enjoyable is that he isn't evil just to be evil. He does everything within a logical reason, and the story goes out of its way to explain what that is, instead of showing us that he's an unstoppable death machine like shitty Goblin Slayer. Speaking of Goblin Slayer, let's get back into this mess of a story and talk about the failings of every character within this series. As an experienced writer myself, to some degree, that writes ensembles, otherwise known as multi-perspective stories with multiple main protagonists, it's understandable from any degree that writing characters within a story can be difficult. Hell, writing stories at all is just hard enough as it is. From beginning to end, you have to interweave a coherent story that makes sense while levying information you're only privy to because you're the creator of the story. So revealing and concealing information is key to writing a good story while simultaneously building up good characters. I said this before, but anyone can write a story and put words on a piece of paper and call that a story. That's easy, especially if the story is short. But when you write over 200 pages of story, it gets more difficult to explain what's happening and why, while keeping up the past continuity and existing lines of thought of characters, especially if you have more than one main protagonist and a multitude of characters within the story. Now, this is where the problem with Goblin Slayer comes in. Not only does the writer fail at keeping continuity coherent, but he seems to be unable to write his own characters properly, with them having different to multiple personalities to zero personalities at all, very much like cardboard cutouts. So you can read Goblin Slayer proper and then read its spin-offs to then ask yourself why the hell is everyone's personality different without any explanation given to us within the story, nor the writer actually explaining why everyone seems different within the spin-off series. And yeah, we'll get to the title of the video eventually. Considering Goblin Slayer as a story is a semi-ensemble with GS being the lead, every now and again the story would jump to a random character I personally don't care about nor have the ability to be connected to in any other way, because they all eventually die or have boring motivations with lackluster character development and personality. An ensemble story can be interpreted from many angles, with anyone dying at a moment's notice in a Game of Thrones-esque fashion, but most importantly and most strenuous task about writing these kinds of stories is assuring the reader or viewer that they connect with the characters you're telling the story's perspective from. So assuring each character is distinct and compelling in their own right is important, which Goblin Slayer fails at during every turn and every opportunity it has, with everyone dying left or right, or the story just stupidly cutting off to watch another character get raped by a goblin. It's really stupid. The characters within this series aren't without a doubt cardboard cutouts and statues without any personality, but the worst of them all is the very fact that the story's main protagonist is even a compelling character, considering the very fact that he's a Mary Sue. And as equally bad as a character as Rey from Star Wars The New Trilogy and Kirito from Sword Art Online. Now, I could easily talk about the main protagonist's lackluster horrendous character design and the dried out edgy personality he has, but discussing why this character makes zero sense in the chronology of the series seems more fun to start off with. But to make this blatantly clear, the reason why GS is a Deus Ex Machina, cuck, and Mary Sue of the entire series is solely due to the very fact that he's unchallenged and uncontested throughout the duration of the entire series, from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 40 to all the other spins-off this series has. He's an unstoppable death machine, and nothing gets in his way, nothing staggers him, and sure as hell, nothing stops him. Why, you might be asking? Well, the simple answer is due to the very fact that Goblin Slayer as a character is the male personification of a Mary Sue. Now, let me put it this way for those that don't understand. Even in the spin-off series, Goblin Slayer Year 1, with an emphasis on Year 1, which is supposed to be the character's origin story, the main character is killing 12 to 8 goblins at a time with zero fucks given, and zero problems and issues, and without any injury whatsoever. He even fights a wizard goblin and a giant-sized fucking orc, and lives to tell his tale without breaking a single bone in his body, and without receiving any fatal wounds. Oh, and I almost forgot the most titular thing about the entire event. He does it all fucking solo. And this is on the 3rd fucking chapter, man! How is this year 1? It's like the writer completely forgot this was year 0 and skipped to year 10 because this isn't year 1, because if it was, why is he so pro at killing goblins so early in the stories? This story is so bad, it doesn't even give you the training montage of him becoming Goblin Slayer. He just Goblin Slayer from start to finish. We see his sister get raped and all the other girls get raped. He watches it for 3 days or so. He eats some barked wood for a couple days and bada bing bada boom, he's Goblin Slayer without any training montage, no training, no master. There's a master, but we'll talk about him a little bit later. But the point is, he's Goblin Slayer start to finish. Even in Batman Zero Year, written by Scott Snyder, doesn't have Batman fighting 20 guys in the first story arc. He struggles to be Batman because he's so inexperienced at being Batman. His equipment breaks down, he even gets his ass kicked a couple times, and at the end of the fucking story, he dies! During Batman Endgame. Now, of course, he doesn't stay dead, he just lost his memory and it was brought back with the Lazarus pits and things like that. But the point it was Batman Zero Year. Year Zero. The beginning of Batman. The first outfit. The first gadgets. He had purple gloves, his armor was shit, he was getting hurt all the time, he was limping, his body got fucked up. We saw it all in Zero Year. And he didn't even have the fucking Batmobile in Zero Year too. It was Batman encountering his rogues gallery for the first time and trying to figure out how the hell am I going to defeat these deranged people and why are they so fucked up in the head so he can defeat them. He didn't win because he was Batman. He won because he outsmarted them in unique ways, while Goblin Slayer wins every fight because he's Goblin Slayer and he's a Mary Sue cliche who has zero consequences from any of his actions. Now, before you speak up and speak like a dummy in the comment section and say, Batman stories have zero consequences, I guess you haven't been reading Batman in recent years, because as of today, Batwoman killed someone, and that someone was the reformed Clayface, who was originally a villain, but reformed himself into a good person, and Catherine Kane kills him, even though he had a psychotic breakdown that wasn't even his fault. And in turn, the consequences because she killed Clayface is not only was Batman mad, she was literally kicked out of the Batman family, and everyone shuns her way and pretends like she doesn't exist. Meanwhile, Red Hood, Jason Todd, has killed 89 confirmed people, in addition to the Penguin, making it 90, then broke off from the Batman team to do his own thing with Speedy, aka Arsenal. Not only that, he was a dumbass and killed someone on live TV, so now he's a wanted fugitive in the DC universe. And of course, there was the wrath of Batman and he beat the shit out of Jason Todd, which hurt like hell. And speaking of Batman, did I forget to mention Batman almost got married for the 17th time, but it turned out to be an overly complicated revenge plot by his entire rogues gallery? There's a lot of consequences in Batman. I can talk about it for quite a bit of time now, but right now isn't the time. And for those that want to make the argument, well, it's Batman, he has like over 800 issues of continuity in comics, and Goblin Slayer has like 40. Let me tell you this. Batman Year Zero is 28 issues long, while Goblin Slayer, plus all of its spin-offs, is 40 plus chapters long. And Batman Zero Year gives better characterization of Bruce Wayne than Goblin Slayer can do with an additional 12 chapters about its main cast and its titular character. And for those that also want to spit some more shade, this is me excluding the sequel to Batman Zero Year, City of Owls, Night of Owls, Death of the Family, Endgame, and Graveyard Shift story arcs. I could throw in Super Heavy if I really wanted to, but you know, Super Heavy was alright. But immediately thinking what everyone else is thinking, in all medias, cliches exist, therefore they are unavoidable at times, and anime isn't without exception. The problem is, Goblin Slayer is a story that revolves and ravels in its own embrace of the stereotypical cliche characters, with the fundamental problem of the story being that, and only that, with just passable characters for the narrative being told, which is the excuse people like to use when it comes to certain expectations, when it comes to certain anime and manga, which is really bad. The problem with thinking like that is when you accept mediocrity, ultimately mediocrity will be produced. The passable movie trends we have, the passable anime trends we have, the constant stream of isekai bullshit we get every season is the actual effect of everyone accepting mediocrity. Have some goddamn expectations to story writers, aka people who sit on their ass all day and get paid to think of ideas and turn those ideas into actual media. But as I was saying, not only does the writer not add any layers to any of the characters, making them boring and stagnant as possible, but the most important fact that the story continuously does from chapter 1 all the way up to the current chapters and the ongoing chapters is that all the characters are too capable for the narrative that the story is trying to tell, meaning that they have too much plot armor. In short, Goblin Slayer is over-dramatized Mary Sue. Let me put it this way. If you were to go to Goblin Slayer wiki or read the story for yourself, you couldn't describe any of these characters because none of them actually exist within this world, but are used as convenient plot devices for the plot's sake, including the most generic names in the story to ever exist with an anime and manga history to this date, from my complete opinion. This isn't the story's fault per se, it's just the incompetence and laziness of the author to create a story that really matters with any real stakes. The Pop-Tart who wrote this garbage is a novice author who had no business writing the story in a serialized professional environment, considering it was just by chance at the time every Japanese publication company was grabbing web novels off the lazy bus they found online, getting more than a few thousand views. Now, because he's a novice, doesn't mean he's incapable of creating anything good storytelling wise, it just means he's not experienced enough to interject realism into the story, making things appear cynical within an absurdist world. But instead of writing his insane wish fulfillment power fantasies into the story, then producing some characters having some dynamic characteristics, but he instead decides to write one-note characters that we'll talk about in a few minutes, making them nothing special than a yellow skillo among greens, blues, and browns. Now, it's understandable for you to write your wish fulfillment fantasies online for people to read for fan fiction, but when the prerequisite knowledge is needed to understand the base plot of the story's narrative, there comes some issues with the narrative itself. The problem with Goblin Slayer's character as a whole is that he's a power fantasy character, much like Goku or Vegeta. But the second problem comes with the very fact that the story isn't original and existing within its own world, but the world of Dungeons & Dragons, because the story is a fan fiction of it without any original lore or ideas, with the author literally bouncing from the game's lore in his own continuity to random jargon to fill up his own copying someone else's homework because he can't do his own. If you don't believe me, the explanation given to us for the reason that everything occurs within the story is simply because the world of Goblin Slayer takes place in a Dungeons & Dragons game board. It's even explained in an interview with the Anime Man, the reason nobody has real names within the series is because the author wanted the reader to personify themselves onto the characters like a goddamn game and not a story. And if you don't believe me, watch this.
質問の続きといえば、もう一つの、ちょっと変わってて面白かったなっていう点なんですけど、そのキャラクターの名前が個別に付けられていないのはなぜですか？
そうですね。まず書いてる時にちょっと別の媒体で作品を発表していたのをきちんと小説で書き直して出版というふうな形にはなったんですけど、その時にキャラクターに名前を付け直そうとはしたんですが、どうもしっくりこないんですね。で、いろいろ考えていくうちに多分これはそれぞれのキャラクターはどこかの誰かが遊んでる TRPG で作られたキャラクターなんだろうと。ということは読む人が思い思いに名前を付けてくれればそれでいいんじゃないかなというふうに思ったので、名前をなしで書いた。なんかゴブリンスレイヤーはゴブリンスレイヤーなのだから女神官さんは女神官さんでいいじゃないかというふうな感じもあったので。
Sounds like some bullshit to me. How you gonna write names for a character and say none of them fit, so you ultimately result to the default Goblin Slayer is gonna be called Goblin Slayer, and Priestess is gonna be called Priestess? Imagine you going to see Mission Impossible and have Tom Cruise be called Point Man the entire movie. Imagine any fucking movie or TV show with the characters just being called what they are. You're watching Star Wars The Last Jedi, Rey might as well just be called Mary Sue because that's what she is. I'm watching Sword Art Online, Kirito might as well just be called the Unstoppable Black Swordman because that's what he is, and Lightning Flash Asuna can be called fan service. Listen, I even know people are fucking lazy. No one's gonna give Goblin Slayer their own name, and no one's gonna add imaginative shortcuts to ultimately discover what something is. Another problem with this manga and the light novel, like I said, is the story requires you to have prerequisite knowledge of fantasy lore. There is no exposition within the story that tell you goblins rape women because they need to reproduce, because they don't reproduce sexually with each other. They need a host to reproduce. But the manga doesn't tell you that, and the light novel doesn't tell you that until volume 3. It's volume 2 in the light novel. In volume 3 in the manga, when it just comes out and says, look, goblins rape women because yada 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 yada. And it's not only that, the man sits there in an interview and fucking lies out of his teeth about the story he's writing. It seems to be that he's oblivious to what his own light novel slash manga slash anime is even about. Just listen to this.
スレイヤーは他のファンタジーライトノベルとどのように違うんでしょう。やっぱりそのいろいろなライトノベルとか読んでるんですけど、先生のおっしゃる通りやっぱりそのファンタジー系はその異世界系とかゲーム系とかなんですけど、ゴブリンスレイヤーはやっぱりダークファンタジーじゃないですか。
そうですね。
どちらかといえば。でそのダークファンタジー系って僕の偏見だけかもしれないですけど、ライトノベル世界ではあまり見ない系統だと思うんですよ。
ムーブというか流行はあって、 それこそずっと前のロードスト戦記ですとかの頃はやっぱりなんていうのかな、異世界転生とかではないし、まあ、ロードスト戦記もテーブルトークを元にはしてるんですけど、やっぱり古典ファンタジー的なものがあって、それからまあオーフェンですとかスレイヤーズとかもうやっぱり多少軽いノリには見えてもやっぱり割と重たいお話が続いててっていうところからだんだん何から始まったのかちょっとさすがにわからないんですけど、
何かしら日常系っていうか
そうですね
ですよね
が入っていって最近のネットゲーム的な異世界転生的なものがやっぱり流行してきたのかなっていうのがあるので、やってることは多分ちょっと前のに流行ったやつをもう一回やってるっていうだけではないかなというふうには自分では考えてますね。
This is Goblin Slayer Volume 3. This is Chivalry of a Failed Knight Volume 3. This is Goblin Slayer Volume 2. This is The Devil's New Sister Volume 2. This is Goblin Slayer Volume 4. This is Data Live Volume 4. This is Goblin Slayer Volume 7. This is Shakira Volume 11. This is Goblin Slayer Year 1 Spin-off Side Story Volume 1. This is High School DxD DX Volume 4. This is Records of Lotus. The problem with Goblin Slayer and what it shares in comparison to every other series that we have seen and that I have mentioned is that they all include dumb male protagonists and most importantly, fan service. As we talked about priorly, this series likes to pretend it's dark when it's really just a fan service comedy. The first 14 chapters are the most misleading chapters you'll read in your entire life in regards to a dark fantasy, when this series is nothing but High School DxD, Browser No Testament, Sakura, and any other fan service series that you could watch out there, but with the introduction of killing goblins. There is a litany of female characters, and not only are they incapable of doing with anything in this series, if they actually do something within the series, it's because the plot demands that they do something. The most darkest aspect about Goblin Slayer is the very fact that the author is too much of a pussy to write down the actual emotions of the characters. Goblin Slayer, this amazingly indestructible death machine that kills everything in his path, and he has no emotions. Ooh, look how Punisher-esque he is. Meanwhile, the women in this world get raped by goblins and they give birth to them. Not only does this not affect any of them emotionally, it ultimately has no effect on their lives because it's not a big deal because they got raped. And if it does cause any emotions, they'll get over it. It's just a phase. This series continuously pushes away serious plot points and serious emotions and seriously dark things that would fuck any person up and excludes it just for hee hee ha ha LOL plots. Here's Blade Maiden talking about how she got raped and how it really kinda didn't affect her life. She just couldn't be an adventurer anymore. It's not like she's traumatized or anything. The character pretends like she's traumatized and like it actually had a meaning to her actual life, but this doesn't stop her from throwing herself at Goblin Slayer like a whore and trying to get into his pants. You see, I would actually like Goblin Slayer if the author was capable of writing emotions and pretended and added some cynical realism to this series. How the hell are you gonna get raped and say, oh, you know, it's not much of a big deal? Then how are you also gonna get half of your arm bitten off and then be like, oh, well, you know, it wasn't much of a big deal. I got my arm back, so I'm just gonna keep going on adventuring and not have a massive introspection about if I should be adventuring or not. Well, you know, it happened again. I almost got raped by a couple of goblins, but, you know, Goblin Slayer was here to save me. I'm not gonna have a massive introspection about my life. I'm not gonna be extra cautious or anything. I'm still gonna dress up as this slutty whore and go out there and go on in some adventures because this outfit was sure as hell protect me, even though it's not covering my body. There's so many fucking close calls within this series. It's almost laughable, the very fact that Goblin Slayer comes at the very last second to save the day and they don't even question that they should be doing what they're doing or not. And the so-called trauma that's in this series is bullshit, so I don't want to hear it. And lastly, the creator of this series said this.
作品がやっぱり僕が見た感じだとやっぱり第三者視点で書かれているじゃないですか。僕の見てきたライトノベルだとやっぱり第三者視点でストーリーを進めるっていうのがまあなかなか 少ないと思うんですよ。主人公になりきるストーリーが多いと思うんですけど、その第三者視点で描くその執筆方法にしたのはなぜですか？
というのは別にその世界の主役主人公っていうわけではないんですよね。物語の主人公ではあっても世界全体から見たら一冒険者でしかないっていうのは、それ自体は最初から書く時から決めていて、でそうなってくるとやっぱり俯瞰した視点で書かないと多分読者の方々にも伝わらないよなっていうのは多分あったかなと思います。ゴブリンスレイヤーのモチーフとしてはアメリカコミのバットマンですとか、あとはパニッシャーですとか、最近だと多分キッカースだとか、要は世界規模の大事件を解決するスーパーマンみたいなヒーローではなくて、そうですね、それをやるときにゴブリンスレイヤーの側だけ書くと本当にゴブリンスレイヤーが世界の主役で他に何もいないみたいな風になっちゃうのは嫌なので、やっぱりスーパーマン勇者がいる一方でゴブリンスレイヤーがいるっていう風にしたかったんですね。でそれを考えるとやっぱり世界全体を俯瞰して見せないといけないよなっていうのは、中でいろんなことを考えている人がいて、それぞれいろんなことをやっていて、その結果として世界が回っていくんだよっていうのはやっぱり伝えたかったので、そういう意味ではやっぱり世界をっていうのは合ってるかなとは思います。
Now, get this. The Superwoman, because there is no Superman of this world, the Superwoman of this world, Blade Maiden, is the individual who defeated the Demon Lord while blind. Now, the biggest thing about this character is that she's been kidnapped by goblins. She escaped, and the story doesn't go into detail of how she was captured and how she escaped, even though she defeated the Demon Lord, which is a way more interesting story than the story being told, by the way. But the main question I have is, how the fuck are you gonna defeat the Demon Lord but get caught by dumbass goblins? How does that fucking even work? And he doesn't even go out of the way to tell you how it works. It just says, well, you know what happened, so use your imagination to see how it happened. You see, throughout the duration of Goblin Slayer, they keep saying goblins are really stupid, but constantly throughout the series, goblins are consistently persistent in kidnapping women. However, what they do fail at is kidnapping men. The problem I have with this is not the fact that they're only kidnapping women, it's that the fact that the characters continuously have the goal to say, well, you know, goblins only have the intelligence of infants, so we really don't have to worry about them in this series, like the goblin population isn't a problem. We talked about why this doesn't make sense in the first fucking video. I can disprove everything this man is saying about his own series. The man keeps saying Goblin Slayer isn't the main protagonist, but in the first video, where we talked about the politics and the economics of the kingdom, we talk about why Goblin Slayer is literally integral to the plot. For those that don't remember, let me give you a crash course of part 1. So what we discussed in part 1 of this video series is that Goblin Slayer is integral to the plot because without Goblin Slayer, the politics and the economics of this world would make literally zero sense, and it is borderline nonsensical. You see, the world of Goblin Slayer works like this. There is a kingdom, and of course it doesn't have a name. There are villages around the kingdom, and of course they don't have names. The only place that has a name that's outside of the kingdom is called the farm. And on this farm, the milk tit or cow tit character lives there. But going back to the main point, in this world, no one gives a fuck about goblins. And due to the very fact that goblins can only reproduce by using a catalyst, that being human women, to reproduce, they kidnap and rape women. Afterwards, they are done or they are unable to reproduce and have more babies. They either eat the fuck out of them or just murder them and throw them away like trash. Now, here's the part of the story that is contradictory to what the author is telling us. Goblin Slayer is integral to the plot. Goblin Slayer is integral to the plot because this story does not make sense on a political or economic level if he's not in the story. You see, the government gives fuck all about women or the villages it surrounds, nor its economy or agriculture. The guild gives fuck all about its economic status, its way it produces money, and how it cares about its own individuals that operate within that guild and the kingdom itself that is ultimately residing in and decided to protect. The reasons behind this, which is explained into the story, is that the kingdom's government and the military and the army are too busy fighting demons way off the coast, not even in their own territory, to be fighting goblins. Now, with this logic in mind, and thinking very rationally, wouldn't you assume, due to the very fact that Goblin Slayer is the only proficient killer of goblins within this entire series, while everyone else that fights goblins either gets skull raped or just flat out killed, wouldn't it logically dictate, if goblins went uncontested for this many years within this series without the existence of Goblin Slayer, they would initially just rape and kill everyone in villages, ultimately amass a goblin army simply due to the very fact that they are moving and reproducing and destroying the environment and agriculture uncontestedly because the government or the guild doesn't care? Wouldn't it logically dictate that somewhere in the kingdom's territory there's just this massive 10,000 army strong goblin army getting ready to skull rape and literally pow through the entire kingdom because no one cared? The answer to this question and the answer to this rational line of thinking is, don't think about it. I'm serious too. You might as well just not think about it because the author's not giving an explanation. And in the first video, like I said, you can check that out, links in the description and whatnot, and I go in depth explaining why it doesn't make sense. But it just doesn't make sense, man. I don't know what this guy's talking about, but the story revolves around Goblin Slayer. If Goblin Slayer would literally die within this story, Priestess and all those other characters aren't strong enough individually to actually be called characters for them to actually stand in this world and be called people. Now, here's a better question a lot of you are pretty much thinking in your mind. Why would the author decide to do this? To better understand this, and the most likely reason why the writer chose to write this story this way, is that you have to understand that Goblin Slayer in itself is bad fanfiction of Dungeons and Dragons. You see, people who read fanfiction and people who write fanfiction are two completely different people. Considering I'm the one critiquing one right now, and my understanding of fanfiction community being nothing but creepy porno fetishes and insane plot lines with delusional sensibilities, I wouldn't count myself as an expert on the subject of fanfiction. In the anime Overlord, it's openly known that the author likes Dungeons and Dragons, and his inspiration to write Overlord was simply due to the very fact that his friends wouldn't play with him, because they all got realized and quit the game. So he wrote Overlord to fill the void, adding more context to Dungeons and Dragons universe he made up within his head, and then it's now known as Overlord. That's a person who creates fanfiction basing it on new material, adding interesting twists and ideas to the genre despite my mediocre view of the anime, light novel, and manga. Anyway, the base point of individuals who write fanfiction have the overarching goal to deconstruct characters of source materials in interesting ways, or simply create supplementary material for which the source lacks because it ended or are currently on hiatus. Keeping that in mind, people who read fanfiction specifically are just looking for extra supplementary ideas for the show or media that they are consuming because it ended or got cancelled. When it comes to Goblin Slayer, everything is just trash in comparison to the Dungeons and Dragons and Overlord, featuring more content and intriguing characters in the first 5 volumes in conjunction to Goblin Slayer's 9. Even standalone, without taking anything into account, when it comes to Goblin Slayer, nothing fits character-wise. All the characters besides the leads feel out of place, and this is because Goblin Slayer is the man with the intelligence of a child and competence of a god, was trained by an old man with a schizophrenic psychopathic tendencies to go on his revenge boner quest and do nothing else because kill goblins because he's Goblin Slayer. That is his only defining characteristic as a character, and it doesn't make him cool, it doesn't make him special, it makes him every other ordinary main protagonist in an isekai ever, being no better than Naruto, and of course the power of love and hope cliche. Goblin Slayer isn't someone with an interesting philosophy and or ideology. He's a character with a baseline intelligence of 7 IQ points and is a basic thinker, who sees a goblin and the first thing he thinks within his mind is, I need to kill it. The thing is, the author likes to pretend that the Goblin Slayer character is developing as the story continues with all the people he encounters within the world, and the people around him are trying to fix his broken psyche, but the reverse is actually happening within the story. As the story continues, the characters ultimately fall in line with Goblin Slayer and don't contest him in any way. In zero occasions within this story does anyone ever talk about their feelings, but instead shoves them inside for acting like retarded people and saying, ooh and ah, I gotta kill this goblin. And that's the most frustrating aspect about his Mary Sue character. He's fucking invincible, and he gets rewarded for stupid actions and no consequences, while his selflessness actions to protect others translate into his base intelligence and his actions. He's a selfless and predictable because he's dumb. He has a stupid catchphrase because he's a dead-brain gorilla with plot armor. It's quite funny, actually, that everyone else in this universe gets skulled raped besides the main cast and him, especially while the cast of characters are as dumb as doorknobs who can't decide to go left or right without the main character's guidance and have no competency as characters at all. Let me know if this sounds familiar in any sense. Priestess is the 15-year-old whose key personality traits consist of being young, kind, and a generally helpful person all the time, spewing optimistic speeches while existing in a world where people get killed and raped by monsters in cold, dark dungeons. Oh yeah, she's comedic relief and she wants to fuck the main character because she's a part of his harm. FYI, Priestess' age is officially 16 while Goblin Slayer is 21. But you know, medieval ages, they always did little girls back then. No. Lizard Priest and Dwarf Shaman are the most uninteresting one-dimensional characters since the Beatless anime begun airing in spring 2018, and that was a terrible anime. They are in the story literally just to be around. They serve zero purpose and have no reason to live besides to help Goblin Slayer and be his slaves. They have no defining character traits, and the only thing that sticks out for them characteristically is one's a lizard and another's a dwarf with a big ass beard. They literally have no reason to be around besides to suck the main character's dick and to help him for no reason. They don't even have any interesting dialogues or conversation because everything that they say and everything that comes out of their mouth is exposition. High Elf Archer, despite being over 2,000 fucking years old, has no idea how evil the world is, despite her living in it for over 2,000 years. And her key personality trait, after living for 2,000 years, is that she's completely useless, just as much as Guild Girl, who also gets paid to give people inadequate information, sending them to their deaths. While Cowgirl, also known as Cow Tits, whose main function in the story is to have bouncy boobs and be the damsel in distress all the time whenever possible, while keeping the one-note pure good optimism beliefs of everything's gonna be okay when nothing is okay, because nothing is ever gonna be okay. It only gets worse and worse, decides to do nothing but be fan service and useless. There's a section of the story when she wants to stay in a farm and die at the hands of goblins in an invasion because she doesn't want to lose a home. Not taking into consideration how losing the farm could possibly fuck the economy of this world, but her own personal benefit. But either way, it's still stupid because who in their right mind wants to be raped and tortured for a farm? And all the reasons that you can give at this particular time is that I don't want to lose the farm because I don't want to lose another home to goblins. Get that bullshit out of here and write some better goddamn characters. This is so fucking lazy. The farm has literally zero sentimental value to the character, and if it does have some, the story doesn't want to explain it because the story writer doesn't care. And the story writer doesn't care, I definitely don't give a shit. Going back to the High Elf, her character is written so poorly and incompetently, almost all the words that come out of her mouth is just jargon, or something so stupid it make you want to think the character was brain dead her entire life of living for 2,000 years! She literally has zero characteristics or character traits that are interesting or anything that you can talk about her that's fundamentally or remotely integral to her character. She's around just to be around, and she has a bow because she's an archer. Considering she's an immortal, which the story doesn't tell you because you have to read Dungeons and Dragons and look at the Wikipedia page, you'd think the author would like to explore the psychological trauma of living for over 2,000 years, but he doesn't, and instead makes her as generic as possible while simultaneously making her stupid as possible, while giving her no special characteristics besides the fact that she has a bow and an arrow she carries. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, she does actually have a characteristic. She has near perfect accuracy when the plot demands it, and she has perfect aim, but of course that only occurs when the plot demands it. Priestess, on the other hand, is an entirely new can of worms. Her character is completely and utterly useless. The only thing that she's good for is turning tricks at a 7-Eleven. All she does is stand around and make jokes while swinging her magical staff around, using pointless magic that's just convenient enough to help the plot solve whatever problem Goblin Slayer has at the time. You can argue these are her base abilities. When it honestly comes down to it though, with her personality, it's a mystery why she actually has powers in the first place, let alone as an adventurer. Doesn't even have the psychological prowess to be one, neither does the strength. The story constantly has this theme of, well, the person wasn't prepared to be an adventurer, so that's why that kid got skull raped in that dungeon, because he thought it was going to be easy and gung-ho and fun, but the priestess can be gung-ho and fun and be perfectly fine in the dungeon. You know why? Because Goblin Slayer's there. She's protected all the time, and she has plot armor just as thick or even thicker as Goblin Slayer, with the intellectual capacity just as thin. All these characters share something in common, which each and every single one of them within the story. You must be wondering what it is. Well, it's very simple, and you can probably guess it by now. It's the very fact that Aqua from Konosuba is more useful than all of them put together. All the female characters want to fuck Goblin Slayer, while all the men admire him, craving to be just like his pony little punk ass. But the problem with Goblin Slayer, which makes him a Mary Sue, is that he's the most prominent and potent character within the story, where all the plot leads and all the plots converge, but shares a common interest, never opposing his ideologies, ideas, or tactics. All the characters go to him for help in every single problem and every encounter they have, because that's what they do, and they're unable to accomplish mundane tasks. But the biggest problem of them all that make Goblin Slayer a Mary Sue character, and one of the worst characters in the entire series, is that he goes unchallenged throughout the duration of his crusade against the Goblin Menace. Now, let me elaborate on that. Goblin Slayer does go up against goblins, however, he has no problem killing any of them whatsoever. Any situation he falls into, he immediately has the resource and has the technical know-how of how to kill the goblin. Even when he's encountering a monster he's never seen before, he kills it immediately without any problem whatsoever, sustaining 0 injuries like he does all the time. He's omnipotent, unbeatable, has 0 character flaws, and literally annihilates any and everything without hesitation or struggle. He literally just happens to have all the material he needs to get him out of a situation and manage to be never caught off guard. And when he does, he wins, because that's what the plot requires. Because if Goblin Slayer dies, the story can't continue. Now, these character traits would be good for a methodical sociopath, but for someone as idiotic as Goblin Slayer, not so much. If you can't see that as a problem within the character itself, you have no business to judge me critiquing this piece of shit series when the main character always wins and suffers 0 repercussions for any of his actions simply because he's the main character and the plot cannot exist without him because he's so integral to the world. But then again, we talked about how the world doesn't make any sense logically, and we even recapped it in this video, so I'm not even sure how the kingdom began or managed to survive without him all this time, because no one within the story is capable of doing what Goblin Slayer does and the main cast, because they are too stupid and have no interest in defending their own territories from monsters, including goblins, because they're too busy fighting demons and dragons. For a manga and a light novel series that wants to label itself as a dark fantasy, it seems to never cross the author's minds that adding extra elements and sequences of repetitive retarded comedy in between the segments of rape and characters' desperation to never be counterintuitive for the story to be told is absolutely idiotic. That's the first 14 chapters of this garbage series, and I'll admit the author did a good job of bamboozling everyone to think that this could be something good like Berserk, but the later half of the story is just stupid and comedy, uninteresting edgy dialogue with 0 character development for, well, anyone. In fact, instead of developing the current cast and characters, the author decides to take on more useless characters, which reasons are beyond me. Start to finish, Goblin Slayer is a revenge boner-filled protagonist suffering from attack on Jaeger syndrome. In all 3 books at the series, it's not enough that the author couldn't write 1 decent book about 1 character. He had to make 2 spin-offs to make himself feel good, adding nothing interesting to the power fantasy that already exists, besides more characters and more continuity that doesn't make sense. Because every character acts different in each series. I mean, like, what the fuck? In 1 chapter, the protagonist gets slammed with a 100-pound mullet, falls off a wall into a stone casket, which is later to be revealed a stone staircase, which he didn't break his back on, and in another chapter, he gets knocked the fuck out by a little rock. I mean, what is this shit? Seriously? And of course, in none of these circumstances does he die or suffer any great injury or has any revelations toward what he does. There's 0 character introspection in this series, but mindless action and 0 emotional weight behind what happens and why it happens within the series. There's a goblin in the sewers, but the question is, why do I give a fuck? Yeah, it's bad for the kingdom and the government, but I don't give a rat's ass about them. They're all assholes, and they clearly don't even care about their own environment, so why do I care when they don't care? Goblin Slayer isn't protecting the kingdom because he wants to kill goblins. He's doing it to get his face in those big ass titties every female character seems to have in this goddamn series. Despite him having this Batman-ass backstory where his sister and family were raped and killed by goblins with him watching, somehow the story evades adding any psychological trauma or any psychological aspects into the story. He just keeps on trucking on without any psychological trauma, not because he's mentally strong, but because the writer is so fucking lazy to explore these kinds of ideas in a story. Yeah, there's opportunities, but he capitalizes on none of them. We talked about this in a prior video, and you can check that out if you want. But what makes this protagonist in this world of Mary Sue is he's a cuck that is used as a critical shortcut within the story to fuel the plot through narrative quickies, because the story falls apart if anyone in the main character dies. Oh wow, he has a magical scroll that does a thing that allows him to win conveniently in this one story arc, when he needs it. Ooh, he does a thing and the bad guy does the other thing that sets him up for ultimate victory. Ah, what was that? He wins again without much effort because he's Goblin Slayer. This shall not stand! This shall not stand! Conveniently, because the big orc died, all the goblins become pussies even though they outnumber the protagonist, and even though they're all injured, we're all gonna run away like punk bitches because the big one died. We're not gonna attack even though we were winning, because the plot demands it. Yeah, it makes sense that logically they were afraid and scared, but that's only if you understand the prerequisite to this story, Dungeons and Dragons, because the story doesn't even want to explain the lore of its own goblins within the Goblin Slayer universe. The story is so poorly written. And by the way, fuck out of here with that bullshit. Goblin Slayer should be a story where anyone can die, even the main lead, but somehow someone always comes along and picks up the slack in a Game of Thrones-esque fashion. In Game of Thrones, everyone can die in the story and the plot can still continue on due to the very fact that there's other characters to pick up the slack and there's actual repercussions for their failures. Only because the main character is dead does not mean the story cannot continue. The story must go on because it's a world. The writer of this series makes it sound like, oh man, this is big ass world, anyone can die and anyone can come along and pick up the slack because they're another character, they have their own thoughts and ideas and their own adventures, when clearly that's not the case because I read the goddamn story. And guess what? None of that's present. In fact, if anything, if everyone in the main cast were to die, I guarantee you the story would just end. The biggest and messiest thing about the story is that it centers around one character, and it's him. Goblin Slayer. The world stops when he does and the world moves when he does. And surely if he dies, the world and the entire plot, like I just said, would fall apart. Yes, there are people that can do what Goblin Slayer does within the story, but as we talked about earlier, with the nonsensical politics and the broken, boring-ass characters, nobody cares if anyone dies within this story, because none of the characters are fucking interesting at all. How do you have one main book and 2 spin-off series, and you haven't had one fleshed out character? That's absolutely ridiculous. Some people view and think Goblin Slayer is a passable character for the story being told, despite the numerous improvements that it clearly could have if the writer used common sense to define some of the characters, adding layers to them, than strictly sticking to cliches. Considering the very notion that people can view this character as passable for the plot is stupid, and tells me you have zero expectations coming out of the person who sits on their ass all day writing stories and gets paid to do so. It makes it quite a hefty amount of money to do so. I think I said this numerous times, but if you're getting paid to sit on your ass all day to write stories, you have an obligation to write stories that are the best of your abilities and making them as interesting as possible, not making them as boring and bland as you possibly can, while being stupid and nonsensical. Gravity Falls makes more sense than Goblin Slayer. Star versus the Forces of Evil is better than Goblin Slayer, and those are kids shows. I had more fun watching a kid show than reading this series. I've watched YouTube animated series with way better characterization than this fucking series. And another obnoxious aspect about this story, and another terrible feature that it has, is the author doesn't want to show the protagonist's face. I don't know why people do this. I don't understand why, but it's so stupid. I don't understand. Why would he do this? He most likely thinks he's being cool when it's really stupid. Thanks, author, for not showing us the main feature of the character that gives us an understanding about the psychological state of the character, like is he happy, is he sad, is he crying, does he feel depressed? Thank you for denying us the access of seeing the real visceral emotions of this particular character. thank you for putting a helmet on his head and having him wear it the entire time so we don't know what he's feeling, and we're in a constant fluctuation of guessing and imagining to ourselves what this character inevitably thinks. We can't tell if he's in pain, we can't tell anything about his character because he's always in a full suit of armor. As I said in the video title, what makes Goblin Slayer and Mary Sue is the very fact that Goblin Slayer is a character unchallenged by the world around him. Any obstacles that are met with him in the story are resolved in 2 chapters or upon his first encounter. His character isn't someone that exists within the world, but a character that exists as a powerful wish fulfillment fantasy by the author, that doesn't fit in the environment that he's supposedly supposed to be in, which is supposed to be a harsh, dark fantasy setting. Everyone can be hurt, and everyone can be psychologically wounded, besides Goblin Slayer. Everyone can be raped besides Goblin Slayer and the married friends he has. And all of that is just a handout, and it's fucking ridiculous. This writer wants everyone to get hurt besides the main cast. Everyone can get hurt besides Goblin Slayer. Everyone can get hurt besides Priestess. Now, the obvious thing that people are going to mention to me is Priestess and Goblin Slayer and all of them, they do get hurt. But do they get maimed? Do they suffer any injuries that stops them from fighting? Do one of them break a leg and is incapacitated for a while, and one of the characters has to do something on their own because they're a strong, developed character? No. In the most ridiculous of instances, the characters have their bodies perfectly intact. Nothing has them break an arm, nothing has them breaking their back or their spine, or breaking a rib cage, or breaking their arms or their legs. Nothing that would gravely incapacitate them to where the point is, well, there's a situation has occurred, because I'm incapacitated, look, Priestess, you're gonna have to go do this on your own. No, Goblin Slayer's always ready to go. There is never an issue or a situation which occurs when it's like, oh my god, I have to do this on my own. I have to figure this out by myself. There isn't any strong, developed characters like that. It's always, we gotta stick together because friendship and bullshit. Man, this fucking manga is so fucking stupid, and it's piss poor writing. It hurts more than ever. What makes Overlord the anime, oh fuck. This crap's gonna need another video part, and it's gonna be the final video part about me talking about this fucking series, and we're gonna be talking about why this series is a narrative mess.
Smile, sweet, sister, sadistic.
Surprise.